somebody say, I wish we could go back to the way things used to be back then. And I don't think so. I wanted to mow a yard. We used a tractor to mow a yard. I couldn't imagine having to mow with one of those push thingies, you know, like with race blades on it, yeah, whatever you call those, or a scythe. I can't imagine doing that. I mean, could you imagine having to go out and before you could feed your kids their Cheerios, you had to go out and make milk Bessie? I mean, could you imagine having to do that? That's what it is. And it's all about work. And a lot of times we all have different ideas about work. I have different ideas about work, but I think today's gonna be really awesome. I love last week. Last week was probably one of my most favorite messages I've ever preached. I absolutely loved it. And we learned a lot about church, how it went. Y'all remember the 3 places at the church we talked about that was that? What was the first worship experience? It was outside. It was outside. What was the second? It went to the tents and then kind of went over to the synagogue or the temple. And then the last place, where did it go? It went to the houses. So we learned about all that, and I love that because that's what we ended on. And we're in a house right now, which I think is just absolutely extremely awesome. I'm kind of excited about what all God's doing. Next week we'll be at Gate City High School. We're doing some different things for the month of September. It's going to be awesome. God's moving. But 2 weeks ago, Darren we was doing what we experimented, we was doing this round table, and we was talking, and somebody said something, and it kind of just reinforced exactly what we're going to talk about today, because we're still in this whole series about Campout. So far it's all been about tents and camping, and it's all associated together. But somebody said something. We was talking about having to wait on God. And remember, David was hiding out in a cave, and he was having to wait on God. And somebody said something. And it was, what do you do while you wait? Oftentimes we don't know what we do. We don't know what to do while we're waiting. We're waiting on God. We know what we're supposed to end up being done. We know what the end result is, but we don't know what to do right now. And we're searching, we're looking to try to find out exactly what it is that we're supposed to do while we wait. This right here will make or break a lot of people. They go stir crazy. Shannon's going to stir crazy right now, being locked up in a house after having surgery. Other people that do the same thing, You get, what do? You get tired of it. Don't you feel like that way when you get sick sometimes and you just, the only thing you felt like doing is laying on the couch, but you want to do anything but lay down on the couch. So for a few minutes you go and you'll clean up the kitchen or the bathroom or something, and you're like, I feel like poo, and I'm going to go back to the couch again, because you've got to move. We don't know what to do. We can't just sit around, but what do we do? So what do you do while you're waiting on God to have His perfect work done in you? What do you do? What do you do with your time? What do you do with your resources? What do you do with your effort? What do you do with your energy? What do you do with your kids? What do you do during all this time? Because as we look through the Bible, I'm thinking, okay, I want God to speak to me in this lightning bolt language. And He looks at me and says, all right, Patty, here's what I want you to do. And I'm, okay, it's very easy. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Now, wouldn't it be great if we all had these experiences like Moses or like Noah, that God would just speak and say, here's the plans to build the ark. Here's everything you need. It's right here. That would be easy. But where we struggle sometimes is, what do we do when we're waiting on these voices from God? What in the world do we do? And I believe today it's going to be life-changing. Because as we're experiencing God through this Uplift Church, as we're experiencing God change lives, and He's changing us, it's awesome, it's unbelievable. And if we're not careful, we'll become complacent and not really find our place. So where's our places? There is a guy in the Bible that I want to teach you about today that I think that is just going to be absolutely awesome. Because we're going to answer this question that I think is super important. What do you do while you're waiting? What will you do? What do you do while you're waiting on God? What do you do? Now, if you would turn with me, I'm gonna go here. I say here in just a minute. It's gonna be the book of Acts. But there's kind of these things that we kind of mentioned before. We've already said when it comes to God that we're going to trust Him, and we've already said that, right? We said that back when we was at Gate City Middle School just a couple weeks ago. We said, will you trust God? Will you trust God with your life? Will you trust God with your future, with your kids? Will you trust God? I said, yeah, it's great. I'm going to trust God. Okay, and we say that we're going to trust God, and that's great. And there's this man who did the exact same thing. I'm going to kind of fill you in about his life. His name was Paul in the Bible, and many of you may already know that was his middle name. That was his Pharisee name. That he had this other name. Y'all remember what his other name was? Saul. And he met somebody and changed his name around. Y'all know who he met?
Jesus.
He met Jesus. So he was on this road. He was killing Christians. He's having them put in jail. And he met Jesus, and his life completely totally changed. From then, he began to teach people all about Jesus. He became what we would probably consider a Jesus freak. Everywhere it was all about Jesus. It was about Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. And it picks up with this, and I think that this is going to be absolutely amazing. This is Acts chapter 18. That I think it's going to be awesome. Because what we left off last time was that the church was in the houses, right? So it went from the tents into the temples, and then it went to the houses. But in Acts chapter 18, you're going to see something else. And I think this is going to absolutely be awesome. But this is Acts chapter 18. I'm going to read this with start with verse 1. It says, after this, he left Athens. This is talking about Paul now. After this, Paul, he left Athens and he went to Corinth, where he found a Jewish man named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul came to them. Number 3. Here's where I want you to pay attention. Verse 3. And being of the same occupation, stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. I'm just going to stop right there and let that sink in just for a minute. And being of the same occupation, stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. Tent makers. What we just read, what was Paul's job? What did Paul do? He made tents. He was a tent maker. Paul was a tent maker. Did you guys know that? I mean, we hear all about Paul, about him starting churches, and about him, all the books in the Bible that he wrote, and about how he would lead people to Jesus, and that he baptized people, and we know about his conversion. But one thing we often overlook is Paul had a job. He worked. That's all the songs that we sung today was all about work, and then try to bury the work, because a lot of times we don't want to work. But Paul worked. And he had a job, and his job was something that we would consider completely and totally not meaningful. He worked like a factory, making tents for people. Making tents. So you could have a roof over your head when you took your family camping. He made tents. This is what he did. And so he hooked up with these other people and made tents. But here's what you really need to get about this. Paul was a working man. Okay? Now this is very important as we go on. Paul was a working man. My wife told me something yesterday, and I absolutely love it. She said that I was a manly man. And I said, what exactly does that mean? She says, you work. You want to do something, you're going to get it done, you work. I asked for a fire pit, bam, got a fire pit. I like that. She thinks I'm a manly man. I work. We work. It's work. Work. Now, when we think of work, we often think about, a job that we clock in, we clock out, work. There's something completely different about work that I'm going to speak to you today. Paul was a tent maker. That's what he did. That's how he made money. That's how he fed his family. That's how he lived and survived, because he had doctor bills. He had family. He had to eat, right? Because you can only beg so much, but he had to eat. Look at this next verse. This is verse 4. We know he was a tent maker, but look at verse 4. He reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade both Jews and Greeks. Verse 5. When Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with preaching the message and solemnly testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. Now, I love these scriptures because we've already read that Paul was a working man, and then he worked a job. He had a job. It doesn't matter where. He had a job. But in verse 4, look at this closely. Look at this closely, because this, I love this. I'm going to read this again. He reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade both Jews and Greeks. I love that verse. Because Paul, even though he was a tent maker, when it came time, he was passionate about people. He was passionate about the message of Jesus, about trying to tell everybody that Jesus died and rose again for them. But he made tents. This is the same guy that was in the tent factory making tents. But when it came church time, he was up there trying to teach and preach to people about Jesus. And I can just picture him there on the, where they do their little assembly line. I don't know how you make a tent, whether you say, okay, you pass me that fabric and cut this, and now we're going to thread this. All right, we need a tent pole, so give me your tent pole and this assembly line. I'm the tent pole maker. Don't ask me for this. I'm not ready yet. But having to pass this on down, and they're just making and they're making this stuff. And he says, hey, you know Jesus? Yes, we had this conversation yesterday. I know Jesus. I gave him. He said, what about your buddy down there? I don't know about him. Ask him. Hey, you know Jesus? And on this assembly, I'm trying to make this stuff because that's what he was passionate about, was teaching people about Jesus. Now look at this next verse, verse 5, okay? I love this. I love this. This is awesome. When you look at this so close, okay, you worked as a tent maker, but I think this is absolutely awesome. Verse 5. Okay, so when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, look at what Paul was occupied with. Paul was occupied with, y'all tell me, with preaching. He was so occupied with preaching this message about Jesus. That's what he was occupied with. That is what he was passionate about. It wasn't the tents. You know, I don't know what model of horse Paul had. He may have had a nice stallion. He could have had a triple crown winner. Or he could have had a donkey. I do not know. It does not tell us his mode of transportation. But in our lives, we put so much effort on the little factory badge on a vehicle. You know, I don't even know what kind of house Paul lived in. I don't know the square footage of his tent. I don't know if he had a Tempur-Pedic pillow or what kind of TV he had. I do not know. I say Tempur-Pedic pillow not because of Garrett, because I love my Tempur-Pedic pillow. I don't know those things. I do not know what model of robe he had, whether it was made by Ralph Lauren or Tommy Hilfiger or if it came from the Walmart line. I do not know. It's not in here. But here's what we do know. Two things. Paul, he worked, but he was passionate about Jesus. He was passionate about people. He cared more about where people were at in life than what they did for a living or how much money they made. Not one time we've seen scripture about what Paul did there, about what he accumulated. But man, we put so much effort onto that about working so we accumulate. I've had so many people tell me this, that I worked so hard so that my family can have it so much better than what I had. And I'm not so sure that providing more is even better. Because we can provide more, and we can miss what's most important. And guys, what's most important is the message of Jesus. Man, we overlook that. But Paul didn't. He worked. He was a working man. He worked in a factory. What we would consider a low-end job. Low-end job. And it did not matter. But he used that as a platform to teach and preach to people about Jesus. Guys, I think that's awesome. Paul was a world changer. Not because of his occupation. Because of his passion, what he was passionate about. Now, I'm sure he was probably passionate about those tents. I mean, I can just picture him walking through the village over there. I made that one. And then, you know, he had his friends here, his preaching buddies, Paul and Silas. I can see him going up to him and say, hey, you see this one? This is last year's model, but this one right here is this year's model tent. You see the seams? We triple threaded seam stringed those, or whatever you call it. I mean, there's 3 lines of seams on those. That baby brave. That thing can go through a class 1 tornado. I'm telling you, 25 miles an hour, it's good. I don't know if he was very passionate about that. I don't know. But we put so much passion and so much energy and effort into our work that we're not careful. We'll get caught up in our work and complaining about our work because that's what we're putting our focus on. But see, when like Paul though, when you're putting the effort, you're putting the passion, you're putting the energy on what really matters, which is Jesus, and that job, all that, hey, that's a job. Hey, I'm here so I can make some money, so I can provide my family. What I really care about though, is your soul. What I really care about is if you know Jesus. I could just imagine the people working this factory line with Paul, you know, those like, man, when you talk about something else, fishing, sports, something. I guarantee you, everybody who got around Paul was listening closely. Before they left him, They knew that he was going to talk to something about Jesus. They knew something about Jesus. Not about the model of clothes he had, his mode of transportation. I felt that he walked. I'm sure that he didn't have any, sort of sandal Nike Airs, But maybe we put so much energy in that. And a lot of times we define our lives by our work. Right? Guys, I fell in that trap. That I was defining myself by work. And I fell into this love with this trap of money. I loved having money. I lived in my pockets. I loved when something would come out that I wanted, and I loved that I would just either pull it out of my pocket or pull it out of my shoe, and I would go get it. I loved that. I thought that was awesome. I thought that was life. I thought that meant that I had a purpose. But if you look here at Paul, that's not at all what he was passionate about. It wasn't at all what he defined his life about. What about the work? It wasn't about the tents. It wasn't about the scenes or whether it was waterproof. It wasn't matter about how big it was. It was about his passion. Now the first thing that I said to you, we need to trust Jesus, okay? Will you trust him? The answer is yes, we're going to trust him. But the second thing that we really need to do in our lives, we have got to get to work. Get to work. Now, you may be looking around and thinking, well, I got a job. I am at work. It doesn't matter if it's at Wendy's. It doesn't matter if it's at the hospital. It doesn't matter if you're working from home. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with sewage or working in a factory. As I look around this room, we've got a bunch of different professions. From healthcare to mining to food to corporations. It don't matter, guys. But here's what does matter. Is that you get to work. And you're telling me, okay, you're telling me to get to work. I'm not a bum. I'm not drawing a check. I am working. I am working. But are you really working? Now when I say that, because when you look at verse 5 again, I'm going to look at this. One verse about the tents, okay? One verse about the tents. But when you look at verse 5 again, I just want to read this again to you. When Silas and Timothy, they came down from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with preaching the message and solemnly testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. God does not call couch potatoes. I learned that last year, and it is so true. Do y'all remember David in the Bible? He had a job before he became king. Y'all remember what his job was? He was a shepherd. He watched sheep. He was a working man. And even Jesus, get this, Jesus, whenever he called the disciples, y'all remember where he went to when he called 4 of the disciples out? He called out Peter and Andrew and James and John. He called these 4 men. And they were with their dad. They were over by their boats. You know what their job was? They were fishermen. Roughneck fishermen, just like what we would see on the Deadliest Catch. I believe they had the foulest mouth. I believe that they worked hard, but they were working men. He called this other guy, and his name was Matthew. Do you remember what Matthew's job was? He was a tax collector. He collected taxes. And Jesus called him. And we even had a doctor in the group. His name was Luke, was a doctor. He was a physician. And Jesus called him out, a working man. One thing that we can do, while we're waiting on God, to move and work in our lives, while we're waiting on God to bring us to what He wants us to be, here's what we have got to do. Get to work and do it the absolute best we possibly can. Guys, I'm telling you, I don't care if you're working at Walmart, or Steak and Burgers, or wherever we're doing it, better do it to the glory of God. Because if you're waiting on God to do something great in your life, He will not do it if you're just laying around being lazy. Everybody I've seen in the Bible that He called out to do a job, they were working people. And they worked. They worked. But according to Paul, that wasn't his primary work. What's his primary work? He's passionate about people. It's all about preaching and teaching about Jesus. You may be saying, well, I'm not a preacher. I'm not a teacher. I can't teach people about Jesus. Oh yes, you can. You all have something very important, and it's very unique to each one of you. Every one of you, and some people call it your story, some people call it my story, some people call it their testimony, but you have a story in your life about what God has done for you. And it is your utmost priority and duty to use your work as a platform so that you can teach people about what God has done for you. That's what Paul did. He would go up to these people and he would tell them a story and say, hey, you know what? When I worked on this assembly line, he said, hey, here's what happened to me. I used to hate God. I loved Him, but I hated this Jesus guy. Okay? Because that just threw everything off. I went to church ever since I was been born, but when Jesus came, things kind of changed. And so what I did was, I would go around and I would grab people who said they were Christians, I would grab them off to jail and wait there until they were going to be killed. That's what I was. And I was doing this, and I was on this road, and I was on the road to Damascus, and I was going to find these people because they had gathered there, and I was on the way to go get them. I was going to drag them out, I was going to have them killed. And while I was on there, I met somebody who changed my life. It was Jesus. The glory of God shone down, and the light was so bright. It was like I had these scabs came over my eyes, and I couldn't even see. And the men that I was with, they had to carry me over to this guy's house. His name was Ananias, and he took me there. And I couldn't see for 3 days, so I fasted and I prayed, and I couldn't even eat. And this man Ananias, he came and he laid his hand upon me, and he prayed for me. He prayed for me, and as he prayed for me, these scales came down off my eyes, and I could see. And God spoke to me right then and there that I was to make it my priority. Not making these tents. That's just my job. My priority was to teach people about Jesus. And that He came, and that He died, and that He rose again so that you too could have life. Would you believe in Him? Guys, that was Paul's platform. That's what he used. He was teaching people about Jesus, and he used his work as a way to do that. So that he could make money, so he could live, so he could go to the next building and tell somebody else what Jesus had done for him. And you all have a story in your life about what Jesus has done for you. Your story is going to be different than her story. Your story is going to be different than your story. But you all have a story. You don't need no preacher to go out and tell people. Yes, that's a part of our job. That's part of what we do. But you have a story. And that video that we first watched, you are going to be in contact with people that I would never, ever get to speak to. So you have a platform to teach people about Jesus. Your platform is going to be completely different. And we have a very diverse group here. Some in healthcare, some in factories, and some with water. And we all got a different area. We all have a different platform. But whatever your platform is, that's your platform. That is your work. That is your job. That is your duty. To work that job the very best you can. But as you work that job, that you would seek an opportunity to share with someone about what God's done for you. So, here's my question to you this morning. First question. When you get to work. Yes, I know that in the morning, the alarm's going to go off, and you're going to have to go to work. And it's going to be time. Larry and Tiffany are not here with us today. Larry's been up for 24 hours straight. They both had to work last night. I thought, how odd they had to work last night. We're talking about work today. They got their work on. But if you know Larry, you know what he does? He's got this amazing gift. He can go up to a complete stranger. I can't do this, but he can go up to a complete stranger and go, hey, can I take just a second? And the next thing you know, he's got them in tears. I mean, he is amazing about teaching people about Jesus. And that may not be your way. That may not be your platform. Larry can do that. But I guarantee you work with somebody. Or you're going to be at school with somebody. And you can invite them to church. You can tell them what God has done for you. My question to you is, will you get to work on what's really important? What's really important? Because I tell you, your job is a means. It's a tool. It's not what's most important. Because all through Scripture, we see that God has taken people out of the workplace to do something completely different. We saw how He done those fishermen. We saw how He done with the doctor. We saw how He done with Noah. He's called people out to do something, and they were busy working. So what do you do while you're waiting on God? Get to work. You use your work as your tool. God, I've got my job, and I'm going to do it the very best I can. I'm going to give you my very best at work. And as I have opportunities, I'm going to do the second thing. Here's my second thing to you. You step up to your platform. Your platform. Will you use your work as a platform to reach out to somebody? It's a platform. Now, when I say a platform, I know that we all have a different idea about what a platform really is. But when I say a platform, whenever you have a guest speaker, or whenever you have, you go to a seminar, or you may have some sort of meeting, usually the guest speakers and thing, usually, what are they on? They're on a platform of some sort. Now, the reason why they're on a platform is so that everybody can see, but the biggest reason why they're on a platform is so the focus and attention can be on them. It's the biggest reason why they're on the platform. So when I'm asking you, will you step up to your platform? Will you step up to your platform? It's because at your work, at your place, in your house, with your family, with your kids, at your school, you have a platform. The question is, what are you using your platform for? My challenge to you today is, will you step up to your platform and use that as a means, as an opportunity to share what God has done for you? Now, I have seen a lot of people do this the completely wrong way. I'm sure you have too. I will not take this and beat you over the head with it. For one, it'll break. If it doesn't, it's going to really hurt your head. This is Gorilla Glass. It's supposed to be unbreakable. We're not going to try it. They call them Bible thumpers. You know, they beat you over the head with it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about get down in the ditches with the people that you work with, working side by side with them, and doing life with them. And as you have an opportunity, hey, let me tell you what God's done for me. Let me tell you about this crazy church. Let me tell you what God has done for my family. Let me tell you how God has completely and totally changed me. See what you're doing when you do that? You're not arguing about did God exist before the Bible was ever created. You're not arguing where is God. You're not arguing anything over the Bible. Here's what you're doing. You're using your platform to tell people what God has done for you. And you know what? Nobody can argue that. You can't argue that. You can argue theology, and you can argue about the Virgin Mary. Was she really a virgin? Did God really? You can argue so many things in the Bible, but you cannot argue what God has done for you. I'm not going to argue that. I can see the evidence of it. Now, I can look around this room and I can see the evidence of what God's done with a lot of you. I can see that evidence. I can see the changed lives. So my question to you is, the challenge, will you step up to your platform and share what God has done for you? Paul was a tent maker. Very unpolished profession. But yet he used as a platform to reach people. Will you use your work as a platform to reach people? Because here's what will happen. Here's what will happen. If you will do this, I promise you that God will bless it. I'm going to share with you just a couple things that's happened in the past several years. In 2003, I took my job with the school system, Scott County School System. I took my job. And I love my job. I get to work on computers. I get to play with technology. Sometimes, like this past week, it absolutely drives me crazy. Sometimes I hate computers because they don't work. And you all know this, right? You turn it on and it just don't work. That was in 2003. Every year at the beginning of school, they had this, they call it the inserts. They bring all the teachers and the faculty and staff together in one room. And I went to my very first one in August of 2003. And what it was, this is a program, and at the very beginning they had this welcome, and then they had a man came up and he led in a prayer. This is a short, simple prayer, but he led in a prayer. And then he went off to the side, and then the next person came and spoke. And this meeting lasted for about an hour and a half. The next year was 2004. 2004, the same thing happened, the same man, the same event, they had to come up. But something happened between 2003 and 2004 in my life. I fully surrendered my life to God. It was absolutely amazing to see the transformation that me and my wife had went through. It was amazing. I was this person who thought that loving life and having life was whether or not you had a PlayStation and had stuff and nice cars. And that's what I thought. And God radically changed me. And I remember praying, God, if you can make something of the mess that I am, I will gladly give you my life. And He did. I've messed up a lot along the way. I still mess up. A lot. He changed me. Actually, it was changing me in 2004. Something happened in 2005. We organized this event, and every time God began just knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking, and I felt like He wanted me to preach His Word. And I was a little nervous, a little overwhelmed because I was a preacher's kid. And I did not want to be a preacher. I did not want to be like my dad. I couldn't find out I'm just like my dad. Minus the beard. I'm just like my dad. Went to the same end service. That was in 2005. This was after I surrendered my life over to God, and they asked me to pray. Would I do a prayer? I said, sure. So instead of getting that same guy up there, they asked me to do it, and so I did. And then the next year, they asked me again, hey, would you do the prayer this time? Yeah, I will. And then something changed in 2007. It's a very rough year for me. During that same year, this was before a coworker of mine, 2007. That's when he took his life. So we're starting this brand new year, and things was a little different. And I felt like that I needed to say something. So I just said a few words, and I read a scripture, and then I prayed. And something shifted. From that time on, people started coming up to me and saying, hey, would you pray for this? Or hey, I need your help with this. Or hey, what would you do about this? The next year I was asking the same thing, and the next year I asked the same thing. And this kind of kept building on. Last year I spoke with this exact same thing, and they asked me if I would do a short devotion. And they said anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. I was like, okay, I will. And I did that again last year. But this year, this happened on Monday, this year, they assembled together 600 people in this room. They said, we're going to do it completely different this year, and I want to get your thoughts on it. I said, okay. They said, we're going to do it completely different. It's going to be really short. At max, it's going to be 30 minutes long. That we're going to have a small welcome to everybody. We're going to have our superintendent speak, and then we're going to have our assistant superintendent speak, and then we want you to speak. But we want you to bring a 15 to 20 minute, just a really encouraging message. We want you to bring us an encouraging message so that you can speak to all our people. And we want your prayer to be the last thing that people hear before they leave. Okay, I'll do it. So this past Monday, I stood before these 600 people. And I spoke. Right before them. See, working on computers is a job. It's a platform. And I'm convinced that I'm going to continue to use my platform for the glory of God as long as I possibly can. Until I have a burning bush moment. Until I have a lightning bolt from the sky Until God knocks me right in the head and says, I want you to do this. I'm going to continue to do it. And I'll encourage you that you do the very same thing. Because since then I have people coming to me in tears and saying, you don't know how I need that. Or you don't know what that has touched me. Guys, you have a platform. Don't overlook it. Don't waste your time complaining about your work. Use it as a platform to reach people. It's a tool. It's not your life. It's a tool. Use it. It's a platform for you to connect with people and share with them what God has done for you. The challenge is when you step up to your platform. Because if you will, I promise you God's going to honor it. I promise you God's going to bless it. There's going to be difficult days. There's going to be days that you're going to want to choke somebody. There's going to be days that you want to take that computer, you want to chuck it right out the window. And there's going to be a day that you don't want to see another patient. You don't want to see another hamburger. And the last thing you want to do is see some water students. That's going to be the last thing that you want. When it does settles, you kind of refocus. You realize what's most important. It's not the job. It's the people. When you step up to your platform and you share with people what God has done, I want to ask you somebody to close your eyes this morning as we come to the close. Father God, you're absolutely awesome and amazing. And sometimes, God, we get so misconstrued about work and life. We learned up today that Paul was a tent maker. All the great things he done in the Bible, he was a tent maker by trade. This is what he did. God, it's my prayer today that we would realize our jobs, I don't care how great or I don't care how we think they're insignificant, they are not insignificant. They're a tool, God. So our challenge today, God, is that we would step up to the platform to share with people what you have done for us. As you continue to pray, maybe you're here sitting among us, you're like, man, I really need to step up my platform. I've been complaining, I've been whining around, I've got enemies. I need to step up to my platform. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for you. If that's you this morning, say, you know what, that's me. I'm going to step up to my platform. I need help with that. I need prayer with that. I need guidance with that. I will say the right thing. I'm going to step up to my platform. Would you pray for me? Would you just raise your hand up and say, yep, that's me. I'm going to step up to my platform. Hands are going up. Good. I'm going to step up to my platform. Father God, you're absolutely awesome and amazing. I pray, God, you can help us as we step up on our platform. That we use it as a way of sharing your great name, your word, to the people that are around us. God, help us not focus in on our bosses. Help us not focus in on all the things that go wrong. Because God, I know that if we ran the show, it would be run completely different. Help us, God, that we might be able to use it as a way to connect with people, and that we would not overlook people's feelings and their families. Help us, God, to share with others what you have done for us. God, you have changed our lives. Help us, God, to share that love. Maybe there's others here today, as you continue to pray, that it's time for you to step up to the ultimate platform. Because you can pretend to be all about Jesus without ever being about Jesus. And so my challenge to you this morning is, just like I did, do you need to surrender your life unto God? That I've done this and I've done that, but I've never taken that step, and it's time. It is time right now. It is time. My heart's racing, my blood is pumping. I need to surrender my life fully unto God right this very minute. I need to do that. I've been whining around, I've been lazing around, I've been putting this off, and today is the day that I need to surrender my life fully unto God. I want to be a workman unto God. You can do that right this very second. You can give your heart to Him right this very second. If that's you this morning, would you just pray? And you say, dear God, take my life. Make me brand new. I accept Jesus as my Savior. I gladly give you my life. Thank you for a new life. Now you have mine. In Jesus' name. If you prayed that prayer right now, and you have just done something absolutely amazing. you given your life to God? No longer. Are you held bound? No longer. Are you tied down by Satan? Now you're free unto God. Not to be perfect, but to be His. If you prayed that prayer this morning, we're going to pray every head bowed and eyes closed. If you prayed that prayer this morning, I want to pray for you right now specifically. Would you just slip your hand and say, yep, I prayed that prayer this morning. Father God, you're absolutely awesome. And I thank you, God, so much for what you're doing. I thank you, God, for the platforms you've given us. Thank you, God, for our jobs. And amongst the economy and amongst all the things that's going on, God, that we have jobs that we can call work. Thank you. May we not waste it. Help us, God, to share your love to those around us. Help us, God, to use our work as a platform to share with others what you have done with us. God, I thank you for those this morning that have prayed that prayer to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. Fill them up, God. Help them to share with others what you have done for them. How they cried out to you and how you saved their life. God, I pray right now that you would do an amazing work in us and through us, that we might be able to focus on you and do, God, what you want done. Lead us, God, throughout this day and this week, that in everything that we say and do might bring glory and honor to you in your great name. Thank you, God, for what you're doing.